There we go. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this month's hot topic. Excited to have our special guest today, and we'll introduce her in a second. Just a welcome to Continuing Professional Education's continual opportunities to provide timely topics to everybody, and to make sure that we can get out information that people need to know. And if there's anything you are interested in hearing about, or someone you'd like to have us bring on, please let us know. This morning is a meeting format, so as you'll see, we have the Hollywood squares of everybody. I think everyone's pretty much gotten used to, whether it's Teams or Zoom or whatever platform you're using. This is kind of an open, but we want to make sure we get the opportunity to finish our presentation, and we want to make sure we can take questions. So if you do have questions along the way, put them in the chat. I've enabled the chat. You can unmute yourself, but we ask, maybe raise your hand so we can do it in an orderly fashion. You can keep yourself on camera, take yourself off camera. That's all up to you on how you feel like doing it, and let people know where you might be this morning. Doesn't appear to be a beach day, so I'm sure everybody is sitting in their house or in their office. With me this morning also is Dr. George Berkowitz, who is the chairman of the board of Continuing Professional Education Services, as well as Julianne Masago, who is our executive director, who she's really the one who makes sure that we all get into the right rooms, and that if we have any problems, she is the queen problem solver, I would say, and does a miraculous job to make sure that we are all doing what we need to do. This is being recorded. We do put all of our recordings up on our website, and that is seepsnj.com. It'll go up within about 24 hours. And anybody can watch it, listen to it again, go back and see what Elizabeth said today, and make sure that if she tells us how to do something, that we can go back and use it again to follow up on how to do something. With that said, I'm going to jump right in. I am going to try to keep everybody muted if there's noise. If you can do that yourself, that works out real well too. I am going to do something that all of my speakers love when I do it. I am going to pin them so that they are the spotlight of our presentation today and not myself. But with us this morning, I'm really, really happy to have Elizabeth Limbrick. I was trying to figure out how long I've known you, and it's probably longer than either of us want to imagine at this point in time.
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah. Elizabeth is currently the director of Brownfields and Sustainable Systems at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. But she comes with a background that, I always think for people who are in, excuse the phrase, government, works out very well, because you have a rounded professional experience, which has seen every side. You spent some time consulting. And yes, George was talking before, and you've worked with two of my most favorite people in the whole wide world. You worked with Jim Gallagher at Handex, and you worked with George Berkowitz at Langen. We won't ask you anything about those days because this is recorded. But also, so years as a consultant, and then you kind of made an interesting jump. You went to DEP for a while. And then to NJIT you worked with, and now you're with EDA. So we're going to talk a lot today, if not almost the whole time, about funding, but you've been on every side of it. So my first thing is tell us about what you do. Tell us about how you think you're there to help us, and how we're going to talk today about how we get money out to people who really need it. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to stop talking.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. We're the Economic Development Authority, for the entire state. And so we are the economic engine that is driving, prosperity, and then looking at really other important priorities as well for the governor, whether that's wealth disparities, addressing different kinds of inequalities, climate change, environmental justice. It's all integrated into what we do. So things are very different than maybe how they were, say, 6 or 7 years ago at the Economic Development Authority. We've gotten to some really new spaces. And we've built out an entire brownfield program at EDA. And with that, we now have multiple types of assistance. And it's really about getting these resources into the communities that need them so that we can take brownfields and turn them back into a good productive reuse, something that is really good for the community, because we see how that really drives economic development as well. And I imagine most of the folks on this meeting understand that as well, that, you know, by taking something that maybe isn't up to its best use and getting it cleaned up, not only does that really help the community as far as, you know, like alleviating the fears that they may have, real or perceived impacts of the environmental contamination, which is, you know, a big issue, but then it also has the opportunity to bring something new to life in that community. So, I mean, that's really behind what we're doing here at EDA in the Brownfields department. We have a number of different programs. The big one I really want to focus on today, but I will definitely talk about all of them, is our Brownfield Redevelopment Incentive. It's also known as our tax credit, and that is tentatively scheduled to come out very soon, or like early summer. We're projecting to launch that program, and we have $300 million. It's a lot of money to you know, to dedicate towards brownfield remediation. So I think between that program, we also have been awarded several grants now from the federal government, from our partners at USEPA. So we have an assessment grant that we were provided by EPA. And what we've done with that money is we took that, we've procured contractors or environmental consultants to perform assessment services, environmental assessment services.
Number 732.
Oh, PA, SI, phase 1, phase 2, and also some planning services around brownfields as well.
1905.
And with that, like what we do is we send those consultants out to the sites that need that kind of assessment activity and to those communities. And there's no charge for those communities. So it's really, you know, a great way. I really think that doing phase 1s, especially, I mean, I know New Jersey, we're really more of a PA state, but, you know, kind of, I realize they are not interchangeable, but sort of using those terms interchangeably, or doing, you know, a PA and a phase 1, it really can help line you up to be able to get access to other funding in the future and to protect your liability, to let you know what you're getting into. I kind of think it's crazy if you're looking at purchasing or acquiring a commercial or industrial property to not be doing that kind of work on the front end. And now we have a resource in the state of New Jersey that's accessible for folks to be able to perform those kinds of activities. And you can just go on to our website, fill out an expression of interest. And if you your site is eligible, you know, we'll talk to EPA, you know, we may be able to provide those services for free. And so that's available for public sector and private sector. So I think that's like a really big piece that helps us. And then building on that, we also received another grant from the US EPA, which is a revolving loan fund. And we've used a portion of those funds at this point to do some sub-grants. And so we've done some really great work in Camden. We're gearing up to do some work in Trenton with those sub-grants. And then we also still have funds remaining to provide low interest loans. And when I say low interest, like these are really favorable terms. It's for the cleanup activities. So it's not for the assessment. It's really for the, you know, shovel in the ground when you're actually doing the remediation works. But with that program, we offer loans, no payments for the first 4 years, 20-year term, and the interest rate varies between 1% and 2%. So it's really, I think, a great program for folks that are looking, you know, maybe for some of those smaller dollars, because the maximum loan amount is $350,000. And then, like I said, we have this big program that's coming up, which is our Brownfield redevelopment incentive.
I'm gonna let you take a drink, or you can stop. I'll take a breather for a second, but I want to go back to a couple of the things that you hit upon. You talked about that EPA grant that you got, where people can kind of do initial assessments. And I'm, by the way, not just because I'm an LSRP and a consultant, buyer beware. If you buy a property, especially in the state of New Jersey, and you haven't done a preliminary assessment, I'm not quite sure what you were thinking, especially with the history in New Jersey. There's not much that is, virgin land, unless you're somewhere down south in New Jersey. So with that said, so it's a two-part process, we'll say. So you actually have approved contractors, and they can get money approved if they qualify.
So what we have in that process, it's interesting. So we actually have 2 grants from EPA that supports this. We're wrapping up our first grant, and now we're rolling into our second grant. I think we still have a little bit of funding, very little bit of funding remaining under the first grant, and then we're getting ready to launch, scale up the program, because the second grant we received was actually $2 million. So we'll be able to scale it up and provide even more services. We're taking that $2 million and hiring 5 environmental consultants. And so that is tentatively scheduled to go to our board in June for approval. So we've issued an RFP. We're going through that process right now. Part of that process is going to our board to get approval for that. But once that's all done, we'll have procured the contractors. People will, provide their expressions of interest. We'll talk to them. We'll try and understand what they're looking to accomplish. We'll work with EPA to ensure that they are in fact eligible, and the site is eligible to receive this. There's some stuff around CERCLA, really, that is what we would be looking at under that particular program is, can't use the monies on Superfund sites or federally involved sites, things like that, things with certain types of administrative consent orders. But beyond that, it's pretty open, as long as we, the grantee, we are EDA, we are the state, as long as we're not the responsible party under CERCLA, it's pretty open. So folks come in, they fill out that expression of interest, we go through that process with them, and we do have them fill out a liability waiver with us and site access agreements and things of that nature, but it doesn't cost them anything. It comes out of our grant from EPA.
And that would just cover the preliminary assessments, the
Assessment and investigation, and it can go, we'll have to look and see, like, as we're going through this process, like, how many requests we get in and stuff, but it can go up through developing a remedial action work plan, remedial cost estimates, and planning services as well. So recently, we worked with a community that had a landfill site that was a closed landfill, I believe, or they were in the process of closing it, and they wanted to figure out what could we do with it in the future. And so we worked with them and did community engagement activities around that and developed like a conceptual reuse plan for them using those funds too.
And as far as the 5 consultant contractors that you're going to approve, the board's going to approve, would they take it from the beginning straight through the end? Or is there a point where the developer would be able to break off and use somebody else? Or is it?
So as long as they're using our services, they would be using the contractors that we procure. Once, if for any reason, they want to use their own. And we also have seen this too. We worked on a site where there's already an LSRP involved. And that LSRP does not happen to be one of the ones that is procured under our contract. So the city, in this case, it was the city who was asking for the assistance. The city continued to pay their LSRP, and then we had the LSRP work with our contractors, and it worked very well. So our contractors went out, and I think we did things like monitoring well repairs, a lot of groundwater sampling, things of that nature, some soil sampling as well. And so they paid their LSRP and we paid our contractors.
Usually in processes of purchases, the timeframes for due diligence tend to be short. Do you think this is something that can be approved relatively quick so that people can actually be able to use the money to, use it as part of their due diligence, because the time frame for their, turnaround time of due diligence is short?
I really do. And so I think we're in a little bit of a weird time, as I mentioned, closing out one grant, starting the next one, going to our board. So there may be a little bit more of an extended period in the next couple months, just as we're, moving through that transition. But as soon as we have it all up and running again with the new grant, it should not take long. I think the biggest piece is going to be having people getting those liability waivers signed and returned back to us.
Gotcha. And is there a specific name for this grant?
We call it our Brownfield Planning and Assessment Services.
Okay, good to know. Now you've mentioned the board a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and that's, to me, that's always a unique part to me of EDA, because you have, state employees who are doing processing, and you're the ones who are doing, making sure you get money from EPA, and, making sure the corporate tax, all that stuff comes in. But ultimately the projects, the money, the funding gets approved by a group of people who got appointed to a board. So tell us a little about the dynamic of the board. You don't have to tell us the people's names. There's no quiz here today, but what are their powers as part of EDA?
They really do steer the ship along with our, CEO, and they set, the priorities for the authority, and they're really ultimately responsible for approving what we do or don't do. And in many cases, the way it's set up is when we come to them with programs. So I did have to go to the board to get approval to even apply for those EPA grants that we mentioned. I'm going to be going to the board to get approval for the selection of the environmental contractors that we have. We can get delegated authorities from the board for different programs, depending on different things. But one of them is whether or not staff needs to use discretion. Oftentimes when it comes down to using discretion, that's a decision that really needs to go back to the board. So as much as we can have black and white types of criteria when we're assessing applications that come in or different things like that, we can get often the delegated authority to approve things without having to go back to the board. It's delegated to the CEO, who can then sub-delegate it as he or she chooses. I think the process is it's a big process, and it does take time. And I think we didn't talk about it yet, but there's also the Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund, where we work together jointly to administer that with DEP. And I think I saw on here that you did have maybe Rachel Stopper on here, and she is really there she is. She is really the expert on HDSRF. And so, I don't want to step on her toes or say anything that maybe isn't completely correct, because she really is the expert on this. But DEP is the one that first gets the application, sees the application, works with the environmental consultants to work things out. And then once they get to a point where DEP feels that they can approve it, they send a memo over to EDA. EDA handles the money part. In the past, we were having to go to the board very frequently for HDSRF approvals. Recently, they have really increased the amount of funding that we can approve by staff under that delegated authority. So we're seeing, different things like that streamline the process. And I think, Rachel, do you have anything else you wanted to add about HDSRF?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah. So what you mentioned just now about delegated authority, the amount that used to be approved for delegated authority was 100,000, and that's been increased to 1.5 million now, I believe. So that creates a better efficiency for approval, because those applications don't need to go to the board. They can be approved. So that's been really helpful for process.
Well, I'm going to ask both of you a question, since Rachel, jumped in. So now put both of you on the spot. There's a lot of talk that, and I believe it has been approved, that the corporate tax is going to be decreased. Okay, so there's potentially going to be less money collected in corporate tax. I haven't seen it yet for my company, but we'll see how that goes. Is there a concern because, you know, the funding is always lagging anyway? Is that going to be a greater lag and a greater bit of stress and pressure on the program funding? Because you've already assigned money out to projects, and now all of a sudden you're expecting X number of dollars on July 1st, and you're not going to get that, or it's going to go down year after year.
The HDSRF is very well funded at this time. And I think if we were to get a lesser allocation than we do in previous years, I do not think that that would be able to affect the amount of applications that we can approve during the given year, fiscal year, otherwise.
Okay, good. That's very good to hear. And how's life after Bill Lindner?
It's great. It's wonderful. It's great.
I'll tell him.
Frank McLaughlin is managing the Brownfields office right now, and it's been very nice.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Sure.
So Elizabeth, I want to jump in because actually this is an interesting dynamic and spread. And of the programs that we talked about, HDSRF, you started DEP. Are any of the other programs where you started other agencies, or is everything else straight to EDA?
All the other programs I mentioned are straight to EDA.
Okay, except for HDSRF.
HDSRF. And I think, you know, just in talking about HDSRF, I imagine a lot of people on this call are pretty familiar with HDSRF, but you know, one of the differences maybe between HDSRF and the Brownfield Planning and Assessment Services that we talked about a moment ago is HDSRF, while they do have some monies available for the private sector, really the vast majority of the money is going to the public sector, to municipalities, to counties, to redevelopment authorities, things of that nature. And it's going for the assessment and investigation services. So there is like an overlap really between the type of services that can be provided between the two programs. And what I would say, one distinction between the two programs is that HDSRF, you procure your own contractor. So you work with your own environmental consultant on that one. Whereas the Brownfield Planning and Assessment Services, we've already done that legwork. So you are limited to, you know, who we have, but at the same time, it means you don't have to go through the, what I would call hassle, having been in the public sector, of having to procure your own contractor.
Of course, there is a comment that did come from the peanut gallery. And one of the things we didn't mention, you know, you did also work at the school construction, New Jersey school construction. What was the final?
We first, it was called the Schools Construction Corp.
Right.
And while I was there, we changed into the Schools Development Authority.
And that was a program that did kind of contract and kind of assign contractors. And it didn't always go great. In this new program, are there more safeguards? Seems to be a better process as to how you're choosing these 5 contractors?
I think so. I mean, we're working with $2 million, which is a much smaller
Gotcha.
award size, I think, than, you know, we were working with at the Schools Development Authority. And we selected 5 contractors because we had the $2 million. We, you know, we're thinking about, like, we didn't want to be where we gave all the work to one contractor and had that contractor get overwhelmed by, you know, having to do this work. So I think we should be, you know, well suited to move through with having 5 contractors.
Okay, let's jump in. I want to, because, you know, you and I spent some time the other day talking, and this incentive program is really, I think, unique. Again, you know, you gave a very good, you know, government answer as to it's going to be rolling out soon, very soon, maybe the summer, but we don't have a time frame yet, but it's going to be soon.
Yes.
So we know it's going to be soon. You know, but to me, it was very interesting because it really, almost anybody can apply for it, it seems. It's kind of open to that. There are some limitations and restrictions and eligibilities. Let's talk about that, because I think for those LSRPs who sometimes have an issue with clients who are restricted on funds, this might be an avenue for them to go down.
I think that's absolutely correct. I think this is going to be such a good program. it's a tax credit. So the way it works is you come in, you apply for our program at the beginning, and there's an application process. And again, that's going to roll out this summer, hopefully. And then it does go to our board as well, because these are like large dollar figure kinds of awards as well. And then you perform the work after you get through our approval process. There's also a piece where you enter into what we call a redevelopment agreement with the authority. After you complete your remediation, you get your tax credit. And we call it a one-time tax credit, which is different than a lot of our other tax credit programs. It's one tax credit. You do your remediation, you prove to us, to DEP, that you did it, and then we tell Treasury, go issue them that certificate so that they can, take that credit on their taxes. And one thing that's also nice about the program is that it can be sold. So even if somebody doesn't have a tax liability, they can sell it. And we actually anticipate that's probably what's going to happen in all the cases. We'll sell it to somebody who does have that tax liability. As far as eligibility, there's a couple things I wanted to just sort of talk about on that are interesting. So it's not limited to private sector or public sector or for-profit or nonprofit. We kept it very open to allow the most types of projects to come in that want to come in. I think the way it's structured, we're probably going to see people come in mostly with remediation only projects. It's called the Brownfield Redevelopment Incentive. And so it really is about that concept of making something new for the community that will be helpful for the community. But the funding under this program is only about remediation activities. So one thing I do want to flag for folks is that it does have a prevailing wage requirement. And, I know that can be something that changes, how things pencil out when a developer looks at it. And that's why I tend to think we'll probably get more remediation only projects coming under here. But if somebody wants to come in and tells me their project is remediation plus the vertical construction, we welcome those kinds of projects as well. One of the big hurdles I see though for this program is that the way the statute is written, and then, of course it trickles down through our rules, is that the applicant cannot be in any way responsible or liable for the contamination at the site. So when you peel back the layers of the onion and you look at this New Jersey Spill Act, in most instances, especially when you're talking about private property owners, if you own the site, you have now become responsible or liable for the contamination. Of course, there are exceptions. So anyone who falls under one of those exceptions is absolutely, that's not an issue for us, right? Some of the things we've worked out with DEP as well, though, are DEP will do a pre-purchase administrative consent order, an ACO, and that will preserve somebody's eligibility for the program. So I think that's definitely one great solution. Other solutions are just really how you structure your deals. So maybe instead of purchasing a site, you're going to lease the site. Maybe you structure your deal so that instead of closing right now, you wait until after you've gotten at least through our process where you enter into the redevelopment agreement with us. Or maybe a lot of times I think developers do this anyway. They wait till the remediation is complete to actually close on the site. So there are ways, but it's something you have to be thinking about really early in the process, so to make sure you preserve your eligibility under that particular criterion. And then public sector generally has Spill Act liability exemptions that work as well.
Right, and you could piggyback this on the other program we talked about, where you could actually use the money and the contractor to have a PA, an SI, and an RI done, and then say, oh, you know what, I need money for remediation and development. I'm going to go back for the incentive program now.
I think that's a great way to do it, is to stack it together. And I also think that we have another program I'm not going to get too much into, but I guess I could put it into the chat, a link to it. It's called our Aspire program. And one of the differences between the programs is the Aspire program is limited in geography as to where within the state it's available, versus the Brownfield program is available throughout the entire state. But the Aspire program funds that other part of the redevelopment. So you could stack these programs together and get monies from both programs to help. So I think if you have like a really large redevelopment project, it could really work well to stack these together. And another thing I don't think I mentioned yet, but I think is really special about this Brownfield redevelopment incentive is that, again, we kept it very flexible. So the types of activities that are available to be funded under that program, it includes assessment, investigation, your typical remediation. But what's really special is it goes beyond that. It pays for demolition. It pays for asbestos abatement, lead-based paint, other infrastructure remedial activities as well. So there's pretty wide array of activities that can fall within that. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of interest, especially the demolition piece.
Interesting. And Elizabeth had put up earlier, I'm just going to put it again, is this flyer relative to that incentive program. And it has, a beautiful QR code on there, which I never thought would come back, but the pandemic has completely brought the QR code back. And then, in the incentive program, it does also talk about, you mentioned the prevailing wage, which could be a hindrance, but it also says for 10 years following project completion. What does that mean?
So, once you have completed your project, let me back up. A lot of the programs we offer at EDA, almost all of them, require what we call construction prevailing wage. And we generally just call that prevailing wage at this point. We just sort of shorthand it. Construction prevailing wage does apply to remedial activities, things like when you're operating a backhoe, excavator, drill rig, different titles. It's determined by Department of Labor. But that's our normal way. In addition to that, this program has something that's unique, which is building services prevailing wage that you're referencing. The building services prevailing wage is what has to extend for 10 years beyond the time that you complete the project. Building services, actually, you have to go and look at the Department of Labor website and, poke around for yourself, but it's really about general building maintenance. And so it's pretty limited in what titles fall within that. Right. It's not like your specialized HVAC or something like that. It is your building site security and the people that maintain and clean your building, your janitorial services, your cleaning services, window cleaners, all fall within that. But it's not a whole lot beyond that. So I don't think it would have actually a major financial impact on the project, but it's just something to be aware of.
So it's not the elevator repairman, but it's the guy who's in the elevator operating it to go floor by floor.
Well, I couldn't even say that for sure without looking at the Department of Labor website, but it definitely is like your site security. And it's the person that's, emptying your waste baskets at the end of the day, something like that.
Okay. I want to take a step back. I know Rachel's still on, but I want to take a step back on HDSRF, Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund. We touched upon it a little, and it was great to hear from Rachel, and great to hear there's money out there, and the program is, I know it's been a while since I worked on them. I need to go back and get some of my clients some money through there, and but one of the things that I always thought was great about that program was putting together partnerships. Okay. Because since municipalities, nonprofits seem to have the best access to those funds, it was always good to take, a project was going to be done in a city and they took a developer and a nonprofit and teamed them all together. Are you still seeing things like that? Are we seeing collaborations and then they go into EDA and DEP and the success of the program really comes out of teamwork? Are you seeing that today?
I am going to defer and see if Rachel has an answer first.
Okay. If she wants to pop back on.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I do think that we are seeing activities like that. It was referenced that the HDSRF is mostly assessment and investigation. And I would say that a lot of our funding, most of our funding does go towards those phases, but we do tend to see some of those partnerships that you referenced during the remedial action phase, because we do have grants available for remedial action for specific end uses, unless you're in the brownfield development area, at which point you can receive remedial action funding no matter the end use. And these are all matching grants. So we might provide 50% to the municipality or 75% remedial action money. And then, there's that match that needs to be met. And very often you might see a nonprofit that will come, or a developer that will come to fill in that match. And that is often when you see the municipality and the private entity working together to complete a project together.
I think that's a really good point, Rachel, and I should have mentioned that too, about that there really is a lot of money available also for remedial activities. It's more limited in nature, and like she said, it depends for that one. And this is what's so nuanced about all of these different programs, right? For HDSRF, it does depend either on the end use or being in a brownfield development area. And then, Rachel, I had heard, I think from Frank McLaughlin in the past, that DEP is looking to reopen the BDAs. Is that still on the table?
That is correct. So the last time that we opened the BDA designations was in 2009, and we are expecting this summer or in the fall, we are going to open up the application process again for new BDA designations, which, as you may know, opens municipalities up to $5 million a year as opposed to $3 million.
Yep. Oh, that's great. That's really good to hear. I'm sure we'll see some email blast or listserv come out, or some kind of video, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And at our Brownfield roundtables, we are providing updates every time.
Yeah, and they've been great. You made me think also that if you do innovative technologies, green technologies, you get more money at the end, don't you also? Isn't there like a higher percentage of your remedial costs can be covered? I remember something about that.
We used to have an innovative technology grant, but that's been deleted from the statute. But no, we don't consider that. But I do think in our applications for the BDA, we might consider smart growth initiatives. Maybe that might be worth an extra point or two.
Okay. While you're both on screen right now, the environmental justice, rules just came out a month ago now, maybe 3 weeks ago. Really talks a lot about, communities that are in need of, not only that they need to be, more publicly tied in and to be, part of the process, but also to be redeveloped, to get opportunities. Are you going to see, is there going to be money from EDA and DEP directed into these environmental justice areas? And that, whether you're going to apply for a BDA in one of those municipalities or just be able to apply for a program, are they going to get priority?
I will say that, as every single municipality is eligible for HDSRF, and in general, our BDA communities and a lot of the communities that come to HDSRF happen to fall into that category anyway. But right now, there's nothing in our statute that would compel us to give environmental justice communities preference.
So I would say from EDA's perspective, it's something we've been looking at. And when we developed this Brownfield redevelopment incentive program, this is actually a competitive program. That said, we have so much money. I don't know exactly how competitive it's truly going to be, because, I don't envision us being oversubscribed. However, if we are oversubscribed, we have a scoring matrix that we'll be looking at. And some of the criteria that are included within that are about environmental justice. They're about community engagement. There's some climate resiliency points included within there as well. And with our revolving loan fund grant that we received from EPA in the past, what we did with that is we restricted the applications to communities that were in the DEP's Community Collaborative Initiative program, which is really overlaps with EJ, and only allowed them to come in like for the first 90 days. So we're looking at different ways in which we can, really direct the monies to the communities that you're talking about. The Brownfield redevelopment incentive also has an enhanced benefit, I would call it. So for most throughout, I said it's available throughout the state, right? Generally, the cap is $4 million and 50% of your remediation costs. So 50% of your remediation costs up to a cap of 4 million. However, if you are located in certain geographic areas, one of those being what we call our government restricted municipalities, which there's 3 municipalities that meet the criteria: Trenton, Atlantic City, and Patterson. Those are all have EJ communities within them. And then in addition to that, there's a mapping tool that's available on our website that you can look at, but we call them qualified incentive tracks. And those qualified incentive tracks are really the areas in which the state is looking to promote development in those areas. So there's some overlap there as well with EJ. So we are always like looking at other ways, and we appreciate any kind of feedback folks have too on how to do more to really direct the monies to those areas that need it most.
I do have another question for you, but a question came up in the chat, which was on the Brownfields redevelopment incentive program. Are you saying that if your client is the current site owner, even if he has no connection to the actual discharge from whom he acquired the site years ago, he would be ineligible for the program?
I would say in most cases, that's a yes. Again, there are certain exemptions under the Spill Act. One of them is, I believe, if you did do a PA and you did an SI and you didn't find anything, then you are exempt, right? Then you are eligible. I think another one is the date at which it was purchased, which I want to say is like September 1993. So if you had acquired the property prior to that time frame, you would be eligible. But if, the way the Spill Act is written is, if you are knew or should have known of the contamination and you went ahead and you acquired it anyway, you are now liable for that contamination. So that's really how we look at it is, are you considered liable under the Spill Act?
Yeah. And that's, it's something that, again, there's a lot of LSRPs on the call, and we can argue over the fact of, when an LSRP needs to be retained based upon the responsibility of PASIs and things like that until we all, probably retire. But it is clear relative to Spill Act as to when you're going for innocent party and when you're trying to prove whether there's contamination on the site prior to your purchase. I think, really the point that's being made here is, if you don't do due diligence and you don't do your PASI and your client purchases the property, all bets are off. If you do proper due diligence and take it through the process of finding contamination, my answer would be, before your client purchases the property and is looking at dealing with this program, have a conversation with EDA, lay it all out, NDEP, and you may have to go into a pre-purchase ACO to protect your liability. And I knew I was waiting to see an answer from somebody. You are not necessarily not liable under the Spill Act just because you bought before September 1993. And Mr. Engel, who is always on our calls, always has the right answer. But yeah, that's so again, I think the answer is that if your client goes through due diligence and finds something, you should have a conversation before assuming that you're going to be eligible or ineligible for money.
I think that's a good point. And thank you, Rick, for sharing that, because I am definitely not an attorney. And so I should not even be trying to play one here, right? But it really gets around whether or not you are liable under the Spill Act. And like I said, we did carve out that if you enter into that pre-purchase ACO with DEP, that will preserve your eligibility under this program. And I do want to say also, DEP has a really big role in this program too. And, we really appreciate our partnership with them. So, anywhere from this part where they, agreed to do the pre-purchase ACO, their DEP is going to be doing a cost reasonableness review under this program. At the end, there'll be a certification where DEP is going to certify that that the cleanup was done, that the costs were actually and reasonably incurred. So, we really appreciate the partnership we have with them.
And it's good that you guys work together well. I mean, it seems when I've gone to the quarterly Brownfields updates, it's hand in hand, EDA and DEP. Let's talk real quick. There's another note here, Brownfields Impact Fund.
Yes.
What is that and how can I get money out of there?
So that one is the one I talked about a little bit earlier that is funded by our EPA revolving loan fund grant. So we branded it our Brownfield Impact Fund. And with the monies we received from EPA, we were able to subgrant a little bit out, which those funds are exhausted at this point, but we still have the monies available for a loan. So if you have cleanup activities at your site and you're looking for like smaller amounts under $350,000, that's our maximum loan amount, we can provide that low interest loan for you. And I think, again, it's really geared towards brownfields because it has that part in there where there's no payments for the first 4 years, no prepayment penalty, super low interest rate. So it really gives the opportunity to like get in, get the cleanup done, and then do your redevelopment and start, bringing your income in so you can repay the loan.
Okay. I'm going to take a step back, but also a step forward on, we talked about on the incentive program, you can't be a discharger. You can't be any way tied in. Anything like that. Is that for a lot of the programs that if you are the operator, you're the owner, the discharge occurred during your ownership, that there's really limited funds for you? Is there anything available for those type of people?
So it varies by program. It really does vary. So the Brownfield redevelopment, it's driven by the statute, which has that language in there.
Yeah.
The 2 programs we have that are funded by EPA, it's based on EPA's requirements. So those are under federal. So those are under CERCLA. So it's a little different. Like CERCLA is generally, there's different ways to get, just like there's different ways and exemptions under the state spill act, there's different exemptions under CERCLA. But one of them is if you do your phase 1 within 180 days before you close on the property, you get a liability protection under CERCLA. So that allows you to come in. So what I would say is for the loan program, if you own the site, that's an important piece. You don't have to own the site though. We can still do the stuff even if you don't own the site. You're willing to take a loan on a site you don't own. We do need site access, right? The person performing the remediation needs site access. Same kind of thing for the assessment. You do not need to own the site as well for that particular program. And as long as we are the grantee in that case, and as long as we are not the responsible party under CERCLA, then it works. So there's an opportunity there. And I would defer to Rachel on anything related to HDSRF and how that works.
Let's lead if Rachel wants to pop back on again.
Yeah, sorry, Rachel.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I stepped away.
So the
for a
question
little
was just
bit. I'm
about
sorry.
like HDSRF and whether folks that are liable or responsible, like how that fits in with HDSRF. Is there a restriction on that?
I see. Yep. So I would say specifically if you are a responsible party, we do have some grants and loans available to you if you are an RP. We have a 25% matching grant that pays for a percentage of soil remediation, and we do have our loans that are available. Very often we have public entities who have acquired properties for the purpose of redevelopment, and they are not considered responsible parties because they have not contributed to contamination. That being said, we do a little bit of a review here for, is the previous owner, are they viable? Are they do they have a responsibility to remediate? And so if it happens to be a viable, responsible party, that might come into play when we determine eligibility, even for our public entities.
Okay, great. Maybe both stay on for this one. And if we get into legalities, we'll walk away. But if you've done the proper due diligence and there is a person responsible for conducting remediation at the time of purchase, assuming that that's the property owner, would I'm assuming the property owner would not be liable. I don't know if that's, I think basically, so the person who is buying the property, I guess, would not be liable. Because it's what it's
I
really,
think my understanding would be they would be a person responsible for conducting the remediation, but not the responsible party. That's
Right.
the way I understand it.
But
Would
that does, so that gets back to the way the statute is worded for like the Brownfield redevelopment incentive is in any way liable or responsible.
Mhm.
So they would be in any way liable or responsible if they purchased the property when they knew or should have known that contamination existed at the property. As Rachel said, though, there are some carve-outs for municipalities.
Yes, and in that case where a property has been purchased by a municipality for the purpose of redevelopment, they are eligible for a spill act exemption where they're exempt from spill act liability.
it's interesting, the second part of Rick's question. What would happen if the PRCR later defaulted and, didn't do its cleanup? Would the original property owner then be eligible for some type of funding or no? Because once ineligible, always ineligible?
I mean, I think I can say for the Brownfield redevelopment incentive, it sounds like they would never have been eligible.
Right.
And then, for the other two programs we have under EPA, it really gets down to CERCLA liability. And I will say they look at petroleum differently than they look at other stuff. So it gets a little more complex with petroleum liability. And then, for HDSRF, I think it's sort of what Rachel had already articulated.
Yeah, and that private entity wouldn't be able to come in and ask for, our public entity assessment and investigation grants. The grant funding that we have eligible to private entities, is a very small universe compared to what we have for our public entities.
Okay, thanks. So as we're getting towards 8 minutes left, thank you very much, Rachel, for joining us this morning. Appreciate you being here, helped everything out. But I noticed, Elizabeth, in your title, it ends with sustainable systems. Okay. If somebody's looking to do a solar project, somebody's looking, what is sustainable systems? And is there money available from EDA for that, for some type of a green project or something that may be outside of strictly remediation?
There is. It's not within my program though. So we do have clean energy programs. We do have like clean tech seed grants. And so we work, also we have other commissions as well that are sort of like in but not of. So that's like government speak.
Yeah.
But the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology, which is led by Executive Director Judith Sheft, does provide different types of clean tech seed grants. We do have an entire program around clean energy. We have other programs like CPACE, which is about, I think it provides loans for things like retrofitting for clean energy. So there are different things available. They're not part of my program. The sustainable systems piece really was meant to capture that we're the lead department within EDA looking at environmental justice and looking at climate resilience as well. So sort of like kind of pulling, and brownfields, of course, pulling all of that together.
And one of the things that the theme, and I've kind of said it a couple of times this morning, is when you're in doubt or you're not sure if there's funding available for you, reach out to EDA, reach out to DEP. Now, would they reach out to you? Are you
reach out to me directly? And especially if it's about brownfields, I'm happy to talk to you and try and figure out what we can do to help support projects. And then if it's about something else that maybe isn't related to what I do, I can either refer you back to our customer service or, see if there's somebody directly I can refer you to as well.
I put your email address into the chat. And so George asked a question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when going back to that other program with the initial 5 contractors who are going to be, I'm not going to say they're not hired by EDA, they're just going to be assigned by EDA to be eligible to provide services under that grant program. The reports that they're generating and the work they're doing is ultimately going to DEP, right?
It may. It's going to be, if they're doing like brownfield planning work, it may not
Okay.
necessarily go to DEP. It depends on what kind of work they're doing. And really what we talk with as the person who is sort of applying for that assistance, like what it is that they envision, it will be public. We will have a document repository available.
Okay, yeah, because I guess, I mean, there'd be PAs and SIs, and you know, knowing, you know, your consultant, your DEP background, I can't imagine you're going to be able to, you're going to be start reading every day all of these PASIs.
I'm not planning to, but you know, I do have staff as well. And you know, really Melissa Dolinsky is going to be the one kind of with the day-to-day administration of these grants. And so that's, you know, a big part. She really enjoys doing that part of her job. So I, you know, think that it should be a really good fit.
Any other questions for Elizabeth relative to the funding that we've talked about today and EDA? Again, a couple things that, you know, I think, you know, takeaways from today are, you know, if you think your client needs funding, if you're eligible, definitely pick the phone up or send an email and ask for eligibility issues. We have the incentive program coming out, you know, sometime in the summer of, I always make fun of, I apologize for all the DEP employees on, you know, DEP says, oh, it's coming out in the summer. We just never say what year it is. But I'm assuming this will be summer of 2023. And Elizabeth, closing words, remarks, what do you think people should be doing?
I think it's, you know, everybody on here is really, you know, looking to do the good work, right? To really help New Jersey become a better place, to clean up these sites, get them back into a productive reuse. And so that's really important work. And we really want to partner with you to help make that work happen. So as Phil said, you know, we're available. We want to talk to people. We are looking to build a pipeline of projects. We have $300 million for that brownfield redevelopment incentive. We want to make sure it gets deployed and helps to build, you know, the better New Jersey that we're all looking for.
And again, we put the little sheets, the flyer. I'll do it one more time.
Okay.
And also Rachel mentioned it. There are quarterly brownfield meetings. All of the minutes of those meetings, the agenda, the agenda, the video are up on the DEP's website under Brownfields. And I go back there all the time because there's some good things that really come out of those meetings. So I highly recommend you look at those. And Elizabeth participates in them, so you hear about these programs also. So with that, I don't see any other questions. Hey, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for your time today. Thank you, Rachel, also. I think we got some good information out. This will go up on the seepsnj.com website. And thank you, Rachel, just put into the chat the Brownfields roundtable link. I keep saying meetings, but it's roundtable. It's just a big roundtable in a virtual world. And if you have any other questions, again, definitely reach out to Elizabeth, a great resource for funding in New Jersey. So thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thanks. Everyone have a great day, good weekend. I'm going to stop recording.